All right, everyone. So we got a major game. This is on Friday, Georgia Tech versus Colorado. Now, this is one of the most exciting games, I think, of week one, and especially between the Thursday and the Friday slates. So we look at Georgia Tech. This is a team that many expect to have a major, major step up year, right? And we're going to go over a little bit of what they did last season to even discuss that. On the other side, Colorado, there are a load of question marks with this team, and we'll get into that as well. But obviously, with Deion Sanders there, there's also a ton of excitement regarding this. Okay, so for Georgia Tech, we'll start, and I'm reading from my notes here. The quarterback and running back are returning. Now, this is always a big deal because, especially early in the season, this means you have a quarterback that has played in the system. This means you have a quarterback who is, going to be able to get you off to a better start than one that was a transfer or one of the younger ones, and he's just a year older. So you bring back two key pieces. I just, it doesn't mean they're definitely winning or losing, but I just think it's something worth pointing out and considering when you're making your bet. They do have a new defensive coordinator. Now, when you're looking at these coordinator positions, once again, it doesn't in itself mean anything, but when you put it together with everything else, it's just something that might take a little bit of time to gel. So if you're thinking about maybe Georgia Tech being a really good team this year, well, maybe that defensive coordinator, maybe he really hits his stride week 3, week 4, week 5, and so these first few weeks might not be quite as good as what will be the final. They have, outside of those, lots of returning starters, and it's the same thing. I know it's kind of almost like repeating myself on the first point, but when you have all these returning starters, it just feels, and it's just the case that things can get going a lot quicker. And also that last year matters a lot more when we're talking about what's going on in the future. So a lot of teams or a lot of people are expecting Georgia Tech to really step up this year, and they figure this is going to be a good year for them. So just looking at their last 5 games, because I think their last 5 games are quite telling. So the first one was against Vanderbilt. They lost that, or the last one against Vanderbilt, 35-27. Not necessarily a bad result. Vandy was a little better than expected last year. They didn't cover the spread, although they were favorites, and I'm sure Vandy, was resting some guys. But at the end of the day, that's not the end of the world. Okay, pretty decent result putting up a fight against a SEC team. 11-29, they played the University of Georgia. Okay, this was 44-42. They lost that game, but did cover the spread. Now that's the part that matters, right? You have a 17-point spread with that game. That's crucial, okay, because they did cover in that number. NC State, they were 7.5-point favorites. They did win the game, but did not cover the spread against Miami. They were 10.5-point underdogs, and they actually won that outright. And then against Virginia Tech, they were 11-point underdogs and they lost 21-6. So the point is, you look at that last selection of games, and I know late in the year, especially bowl games and stuff like that, it's always tough to judge how much you should take stock in some of the games. But I think especially when we're looking at Miami, that's a big win. Keeping it close with Georgia the way they did, I like a lot of what we're seeing. Okay, just putting it that way. But I wanted to give you that kind of background before getting into Colorado, which is the other team. Now, Colorado's a different story. They only actually have 3 returning starters on offense, and the biggest 2 that they lost are Shadur Sanders and Travis Hunter. To me, this is going to be the big test for Deion Sanders this year. Is you kind of overcame a one mountain with Shadur Sanders and Travis Hunter on this team, right? You first season, you started out hot, won a decent, a bit in that first beginning of the year, and then things kind of fell off, right? Things fell off. So because of that, going into your second year, there wasn't quite as much hype, and people thought, maybe Colorado's not that good. And then you delivered a pretty good season last year. And so that to me was a major, major win. However, now that you don't have Shadur, you don't have Hunter, now what you're getting is another test, which is, can you recruit at a high enough level to keep that kind of sustained success? And they're going to need that. They lost 8 starters on defense, but 8 are returning, but they have a bunch of losses on offense. So I bring this up just to say that, to me, when we're talking about such turnover, right? People could say, well, they brought in this transfer, they brought in this transfer. Bottom line is, we don't know yet, right? We know very, very little about this team at this point. And so when I was thinking about who I was going to bet in this game, I was going back and forth. To me, and this is why we present you all of our notes, just so you kind of understand, okay, this is the thought process. To me, the kind of notes bring you to Georgia Tech, right? They have a lot of returning guys. It just feels right. However, I'm going to be betting the Colorado plus 4.5 here, and the reason for that is pretty simple. I have a lot of faith in two things that are going. First of all, I have a lot of faith in Deion Sanders. A lot of people, they view it as, oh, it's just kind of trying to hyping things up, hyping things up, hyping things up. But I think he understands that hype only goes so far. At some point, you have to deliver. And if this is a disaster season, it's really going to be an issue for Deion Sanders and Colorado. It's going to feel like, oh, okay, cool. Without Travis Hunter, without Shadur Sanders, you guys can't compete. That's going to be an issue. I don't think he's going to put out a goose egg. The other part of this is I've heard so much, and I haven't looked at where the money is yet and where the sharp money and the bet percentage, because my guess is there's probably a lot of bets, maybe from your average better on Colorado, but I haven't looked at what the sharps are doing. I just feel like the narrative surrounding this game is a lot of people Georgia Tech, Georgia Tech, Georgia Tech. And whenever I get in that situation, especially early, we talked about this with Nebraska and Cincinnati. Whenever I stumble upon that, I just have to rethink. And sometimes that actually gets me to change my bet. And that's what's happening here is there are a ton of question marks with Colorado. There's no question about that. It just seems like when you have a new defensive coordinator like Georgia Tech has, when you have all of this that seemingly is going your way, there might be something that some people are missing, and especially early on in the year, right? When we get to week 3, when we get to week 4, we're going to have tape to talk about, right? We're going to be able to look at stats, look at prior games, look at all of this. We can't really do that here, only for Georgia Tech, just because they did bring so many back. But for Colorado, it's very simple. They have to be able to protect the quarterback and have some semblance of a run game. This is only a 4.5 point spread, right? When we see this spread here, they are not going to be able to have an anemic offense. They're going to have to do something. And on the flip side, the defense has to get some semblance of stops. This was part of the problem last year and even the year prior is there were times Colorado just looked you know, overmatched up front on both sides of the football, offensive and defensive line. All those things are going to need to change in this game against Georgia Tech. So I'm going to be watching this closely. I will say, though, I think the kind of notes I took all lead to Georgia Tech, right? I just think that's certainly the case, but I'm riding with Colorado just based off the fact that it just feels, and sometimes like I said, this isn't you're necessarily an expert betting channel, right? This is someone who just bets with, their gut. I like Colorado here. It just feels like there is way too much hype right now on a Georgia Tech team. And the beauty of it, if Colorado is able to cover this game, I could very well see Georgia Tech kind of this being a wake up call and maybe they actually become that team that a lot of people are saying that they will be. But if Georgia Tech is up 30 points, I wouldn't be shocked either. So thank you all for watching.